Angel of light, come into me. Show me what I need to see.
Welcome to the Small Victories podcast. I'm your host, Pauline Victoria, an inspirational thought leader that offers transformational perspectives based on my unique experiences as a woman born without arms and legs. I feel like my life has been full of small victories that has led me to discover the greatness within. I believe that there is no summit upon which we reach our greatness. I believe it is a culmination of small victories achieved moment by moment when we turn toward the inward battle where we get to choose despair or hope, misery or miracles, defeat or victory. My goal is to awaken your potential, your purpose, and your power so that you can discover the greatness that lives within you. Think of this podcast as your weekly portion of tools, stories, and teachings that help you reflect on the small victories in your life. Thanks for tuning in, and let's begin. Welcome to another episode of the Small Victories podcast. I'm your host, Pauline Victoria. Imagine finishing one of the world's toughest endurance challenges only to be told you're battling stage 3 cancer. Today, we're talking to Felicity Ashley, former corporate marketer turned Atlantic rower, cancer survivor, and best-selling author of Stronger Than the Storm. Her message? Extraordinary feats aren't reserved for the elite. They're built through mindset, strength, and the willingness to rise again. Stick around to uncover how ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Felicity, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
I am very excited to interview you because I'm all about possibility. I'm all about believing that what your message is, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. So I'm really excited to unpack what that means to you and how you did it, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that think about their lives and don't have the same outlook or feel defeated before they even try. And your life is already extraordinary, your story in of itself, but I do want to dig into your mindset and how you became so resilient in the face of life or death situations, for sure. First, I'd like to ask, you did spend time in corporations and marketing teams. What sparked your leap from corporate roles to signing up for a 3,000-mile ocean row? Like, who does that?
Well, I know. I mean, a lot of people described it very much as a midlife crisis, but for me, it was more about, I suppose, a midlife awakening, really. It was an opportunity that came along, and it just felt like too good an opportunity to turn down. And I think I've always been of the view that you should seize opportunities when they come along, because you don't know if they're going to come along again. And this was one of those times. It was just at the start of the COVID pandemic. So the whole world was kind of obsessed by infection rates and death rates and this, that, and the other. And it was all a very sort of depressing environment to be in. But then my sister asked me if I wanted to row the Atlantic. And it suddenly became a bit of a beacon of light in an otherwise fairly depressing situation through COVID. And I thought, well, do you know what? Why not? And actually, the suggestion to row the Atlantic came while I was rehabbing from having had a hip replacement. And I think for most people, they might think hip replacement is just as a reason to down tools, maybe cut back on exercise and everything else and take it easy. But for me, it was the enabler, the thing that made me able to say yes to this challenge, because I'd been struggling along, literally limping along in quite a lot of pain for about 3 or 4 years. But I'd had a hip replacement and it literally gave me a new lease of life. I suddenly wasn't in pain anymore. And rather than being an excuse to say no, that became my reason to say yes, because there was no reason why I couldn't do this row. And so that was really empowering, having had that operation and then being offered the opportunity to go and row the Atlantic. And I thought, well, what better way to test out a new ceramic hip than putting it into action for 3,000 miles of rowing across the Atlantic? And I think part of it was also about having the opportunity to do it with my sister. That was so special. I know maybe many of the listeners, if they've got siblings, might think it sounds like the most awful thing to do, to spend 40 days in a tiny rowing boat with your sibling. But my sister and I kind of became best of friends probably in our late teens, early 20s. And actually the chance to spend that time together and really reconnect as adults again was just such a special opportunity. So yeah, I think for me, really, it was the mindset and not thinking about the reasons to say no, but thinking about my reasons to say yes, finding reasons to believe that I could do it. And then having the self-confidence and the courage to just say yes, to bite the bullet and go for it.
Yeah. You said, why not do it? And I'm sure if some people and they were given the opportunity, they'll be like, I'll tell you why not. How am I going to eat? How am I going to go to the bathroom? There's sharks out there. Like they can riddle off a list of why nots. And you're not an ignorant person. You're not naive to what it would require to row the Atlantic. What
Yeah.
gave you the ability to ignore the why nots and focus on the opportunity?
Yeah, I think that's where having a powerful motivation and a reason to say yes comes into it, because it is one of the world's toughest endurance events. It was going to be mentally and physically extremely challenging. We had to train for 2 years, and then you've got the race itself. And I think the only way to approach something like that and to get through something like that is to have a really strong motivation for doing it. And for us as a crew, we were 4 working mums and we were called the Mothership. And for us as a crew, I suppose the thing that united us was being mums, but it was about inspiring our children to dream big and to show them that with the right mindset, with a lot of hard work, ordinary people like their mums can do extraordinary things. Because we wanted them to grow up without these limiting beliefs that most of us have, and without questioning their ability or their right, regardless of gender or age, to go and do extraordinary things. And so that was really the thing that I think enabled me to say yes to it, rather than seeing my young children as a reason to say no. It was actually about, well, if I can do this, then I'm going to be inspiring them. And yes, there will be some short-term pain. They'll miss me, I'll miss them. Logistically, it's going to be challenging with 3 small children, but actually the inspiration that will give them through their life will outweigh those short-term negatives. And I think that for all of us was the driving factor and the motivation for doing it and for saying yes. But there was also then personal motivation as well. And that was very much about challenging our own perceptions of what we're capable of and challenging our own limits. Are we capable of doing this? Can we push ourselves further than we've ever pushed ourselves before in midlife? And I think for each of us that there was that personal motivation as well to kind of prove to ourselves that we are still capable of doing extraordinary things. And midlife isn't a reason to stop doing stuff. It's as good a reason as any to start doing things.
Yeah. Do you feel like all of your guys' kids were totally inspired? And how did that change them or even you once the race was complete?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our children ranged in age. So mine were the youngest. When we set off to do the row, they were 4, 6, and 8. My 8-year-old turned 9 while we were away. So they were the youngest. And then I think the eldest were teens, sort of 14, 15. So the older children found, I suppose, the concept of what we were going to do a little bit more challenging because they understood the dangers and the risks. They understood more about the concept of time and that 2 months away was a long time. Whereas for my children, I might have been away for a week. It could have been away for 3 weeks, 3 months. It was all kind of the same to them. As soon as they got used to me not being there, they got into a routine and that was fine. And they also didn't really think about the risks of what we were doing. So logistically, it was more challenging for my family. But emotionally, I think it was harder for the girls who had the older children. But what was amazing was that all of the families and the children came out to Antigua where we finished the race. And it was just so wonderful seeing them when we finished and seeing the pride on their faces, watching their mummies row in and complete something that fewer than 250 women in the world had ever done. And I think for them, feeling really part of that as well. I know much as children missed us, I know for my children, they also kind of in their own way felt like superheroes because of the association with me. They were the center of attention at school because everyone was asking them, how's mummy getting on? And isn't it amazing? So I think they really enjoyed that element of it as well. And what was particularly lovely, not long ago, my daughter, who's now 7, asked me when we were next going to go to Antigua. And I said, I don't know when we're going to go again. And then she said, well, next time we go, are you going to row there? And I said, well, I might do. And she said, can I row with you? And that was just, for me, that was exactly why we did it. Because she's growing up, not even questioning whether she can do it or not, and not even questioning whether she should or she shouldn't. And that was what it was all about, is that they grow up open-minded to the opportunities and the possibilities out there and thinking they can kind of do anything.
Wow, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
You said it took a certain mindset. Mindset's a blanket term for whatever had to happen in your mind in order for you to move through this challenge. Because I'm sure it wasn't easy even as you moved through the row. How would you describe the mindset that you had to apply in order to get through this challenge?
I think it was a growth mindset. You're right. We face so many different setbacks, challenges, obstacles along the way. Any one of them would have been sufficient reason for probably most people to throw their hands in the air and say, that's enough. I'm not going to do it. It's just too much. But going back to our motivation for doing it and showing the children that if you work hard, you can achieve your dreams and goals. I think for all of us, we thought, well, if we give up now, what's that teaching our children about how you achieve things in life? And so each time we hit a setback, there was that motivation to keep going because we were so determined we were going to get to the start line and have a go at this thing that we'd said we were going to do 2 years ago. And it was very much about, I suppose, learning from all of the setbacks and the challenges that we met along the way and seeing those as things that actually strengthened us, both individually, but strengthened us as a crew, because the more challenges and setbacks we faced, the stronger we became. And it's partly about looking back and thinking, if I've got through that challenge, then I can get through the next one and the next one and the next one. And all of that preparation was just the best preparation for actually doing the race and setting out across the Atlantic, because we had been through so many challenges along the way. And it was almost life's way of preparing us for the challenge of a lifetime of taking on the Atlantic. But yeah, I think it was having that growth mindset and just that determination to see it through and to keep going and knowing that we could pick ourselves up. And in part, that probably comes from being kind of in our midlife and having had lots of knocks over the previous kind of 40, 50 years and having learned through experience that you can get up and you can keep going and keep going and keep going.
And the challenges didn't stop there. You came home, you did this wonderful thing that you were probably just thrilled and grateful that you were able to get through this row. And I love the mindset that you described, because I heard Les Brown say, if you have a big enough why, it will carry anyhow. And it's something that I just want to make note of before we move on in your story, because I think people often achieve goals from this push energy. I got to get this goal and I'm going to be pushing this rock uphill or this up at the mountain to get to the goal. And when you have a motivation that just infuses you with such enthusiasm and fire, and you see the possibility of achieving that goal, that's what pulls you. It's not a push.
Yeah.
And whatever problem comes along, they're like, okay, well, it's a problem. We're going to deal with it, because the vision of what's possible is so much bigger than the problems that come up along the way.
Yeah, and you use the word vision, and actually we use visualization such a lot, particularly during the row itself. Just visualizing our children on the dockside in Antigua when we finished. It was literally the light at the end of the tunnel that was drawing us through. And that was so powerful. There were many, many, many tough days in those 40 days, but that's what kept us all going, was knowing that we were literally, every stroke we took, we were getting one oar stroke closer to seeing our children in Antigua. So yeah, visualization was a huge mental tool that we used as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Don't mess with a mama trying to get to her kids. So that is good motivation. So you did this amazing thing. You're on cloud nine. I'm sure there's quite a bit of fanfare around your accomplishment. And then you come home and you're faced with another challenge. Can you share what that was and how you moved through that challenge? And which one was harder, the rowing or
So we finished the row at the end of January, and as you say, felt totally elated, invincible. I was fitter and stronger than I'd ever been, and it felt like, well, nothing can touch me now. So it was sort of living in a bit of a cloud and not really wanting to go back to normal life. It's quite hard coming down from an experience like that. But I went back home, went back to work. Life started to kind of go back to normal. But the only thing that didn't go back to normal, we picked up a few niggles during the row, as you might expect. But for me, the only thing that didn't go back to normal was my bowel habits. And I'd developed this tendency to need to use the toilet more often during night shift. And actually, I won a BOAT award for being the mother most likely to need an inconvenient poo on night shift, which was, as you can imagine, a very glamorous award. It was the envy of the entire crew.
Oh, no.
We laughed about it, but nothing that we were doing was normal. We were eating very strange food. We were eating a lot more food than normal, and we were rowing 12 to 16 hours each every day. So there was every reason to expect a change in bowel habits. But it was when I got home and that didn't settle down, and actually I started needing them to loo more and more often and getting increasing amounts of pain in my tummy, that I thought, this isn't quite right. And I went to my doctors to get it investigated. And throughout the investigations, the word from the medical team was, look, we just need to rule out cancer. It's highly unlikely it's going to be cancer, but we just need to rule it out. And that was because I was, in terms of risk factors, super low on account of my age, my fitness, everything else. I was healthy. But then it was the one thing that wasn't ruled out. So I had a colonoscopy. They found a large tumour. It turned out to be stage 3. So it had gone into some of my lymph nodes as well. Yeah, really, in the matter of about 10 or 12 weeks after completing the row, I had my cancer diagnosis. And suddenly my world turned upside down in a very different way. And it's funny, I don't think you can ever imagine how you're going to feel when you hear those words, you have cancer, until you actually hear them. And it was, for a few moments, it felt like almost like the world had stopped turning and I was looking down on my own sort of body in the operating theatre. And it was almost inconceivable, really, that this was happening, given what I'd just done. It didn't really take me long to apply that growth mindset again and to find not necessarily the positives, but to think, well, why not me? Because I think it's understandable in that situation to think, woe is me, why me? I've just rode the Atlantic, I'm young, I've got young children, I'm fit and I'm strong, why me? But actually, I was able, with this positivity and this growth mindset, to turn it on its head and to think, well, because I'm young, because I'm still fit from the row and I'm strong, why not me? I'm better placed than almost anybody else on the planet to be able to get through this. So for me, it was just about almost applying all of the resilience lessons that I'd learned through the row to just a different challenge. And again, we spoke about having a powerful why and a motivation. And again, my children became my why, my motivation for getting through this next challenge. When I was diagnosed, they were 4, 6, and 9, really young. And I had about 5 days where I didn't know if it was a terminal diagnosis or not. I didn't know if I'd see them grow up. Then when the scans came out looking reasonably positive, it was very much about doing everything in my power to get myself better as quickly as possible, to make sure I was around for as long as possible for my children. And yeah, they became my reason for picking myself up, putting a smile on my face, finding the positives and keeping going. In many ways, being a mum of young children, there was no choice but to keep going. This protective instinct kicked in and I just had to keep going for them. I didn't want to frighten them, for them to see me really down and really low. And so I did keep going. Yeah.
So which one was harder? Which challenge?
Which one was harder? The cancer was harder. Yeah. I suppose because much as there is risk associated with rowing an ocean, it's very easy to kind of manage. Well, I say it's easy. If you do the right things and you go through the right steps, then you can minimize that risk. And it comes down to kind of human error, which affects the level of risk that there is. Whereas with cancer, so much of that is out of your control. Yes, there's a lot that I could do proactively to try and help myself, but you don't really know what's going on. And there was, for a few days, the very real risk that it might be terminal. So that was definitely much more frightening than tackling the Atlantic Ocean. But I think once I had a clear picture of my prognosis and I knew what was going on and I knew what the steps were that I was going to go through in the treatment plan, I think it was then a lot easier for me to manage it. And it almost became a sort of a methodical approach, just like training for the row, in terms of breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. Okay, I've got to get through my surgery, and I've got to rehab from surgery, get strong enough to then have chemo. And then it's about getting through round 1 of chemo, round 2, and so on. And so in many ways, it did become a bit like back in my corporate days, managing a project and just chunking it down and taking it one step at a time and celebrating each of those little milestones along the way, showing the kind of progress I suppose I was making along this next challenge.
Yeah. And you said earlier, like the challenges that you experience are almost preparing you for the next challenge.
Yeah.
And so when you say yes to an opportunity, you don't know exactly how that's going to always impact you because you can't see what's coming in front of you. I'm a big proponent of an opportunity shows up, even if you're scared, just say yes. There's power in the yes.
Massive power in that saying yes. And with that yes, that mental commitment, telling yourself you're going to do something. And I think fear is fine. In fact, fear is good. I've learned through lots of different challenges that actually fear is can be a positive thing if you use it in the right way. So for me, it's kind of become a fuel to make sure that I train hard and I prepare properly for whatever it is, because that's kind of the thing that I can control. And that's my way of managing that fear and putting myself in the best possible place to do whatever it is. So I sort of almost welcome fear because it shows that you're super engaged in whatever it is, and it does motivate me to work harder.
Okay, so it's not everybody's going to row the Atlantic or the Pacific, which I know is coming up for you. So we'll keep tabs on you for that as well in 2026. But there are things that people fear in life, like going after a dream or quitting their job to pursue a purpose that they feel called to pursue, or public speaking. Like I have a speaking event coming up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. How can one manage that fear? So yes, it signifies that we're engaged in it, but we don't want it to take over and overwhelm us.
Yeah. I think it's about not focusing on the elements that are outside of your control and focusing on what you can do about it. You talk about speaking, and I'm in the same boat in that respect. And that again is about channeling that fear into the preparation, because the more you prepare and the more ready you feel, that's the way of reducing the fear. And I think that really applies to anything you're doing. If you're tackling, I don't know, if you're going for an interview at work or you're presenting to the board, again, it's about preparing for these things, because that's the way to, I suppose, preparing for them and anticipating the unexpected so that you go into them confident, and that sort of the consistency of your preparation builds your competence, and then that builds your confidence to take on whatever it is. So I think you can apply that principle of channeling your fear into preparation for almost anything that you're going to do, but almost not fearing fear as well. Use it as a positive driver.
Yeah. I think that's a good reminder that competence builds confidence. So there's going to be a lot of things that we do that we're not confident in. That doesn't mean we don't go do it. We prepare, like you said, we become more competent, and then that will build the confidence to be able to move through the challenge in a more graceful way, hopefully. And not
Yeah.
to deny that there's going to be problems that come up on the way. Most likely
Yeah. Almost invariably, you hit a few roadblocks along the way. But I think it's also about just accepting that you don't have to have all of the answers on day one. You don't have to be an expert in whatever it is on day one. You can learn. One of my favorite quotes is, you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. And I think that's so true. We didn't know how to row an ocean when we first decided we were going to do it, but we had 2 years where we could learn. And by the time we got to the start line, we were ready, safe, and we knew how to row an ocean. And not knowing how you're going to do something is not a reason to say no. Just know that you've got the capacity to learn, and that will enable you to kind of get through the steps that you need to get through.
Very cool. Your book. Tell us a little bit about your book and one reason why you think people should read it.
My book's called Stronger Than the Storm, and that really I suppose sums it up for me. It's very much my memoirs. It starts with a bit of background to my childhood and I suppose the formative years, and perhaps what's given me this sort of positivity and natural optimism about life. But then the focus is really about events leading up to the row itself, and then my cancer diagnosis and how I managed all of the different challenges and setbacks along the way, the lessons I've learned, and I suppose reflecting on those, how I apply them now in life. And it's absolutely not a woe is me story. It's very much about, it's a message of hope to, I think, show people that it doesn't really matter what life throws at you, and life will throw curveballs. We all have within us the power to be stronger than whatever life throws at us. And it's about harnessing our inner strength and our inner powers to pick ourselves up and to keep going. And I hope the reason I think for people to read it is because a lot of what I talk about is actually very relatable. I talk about losing my dad and the kind of the grief of losing a parent. That's a universal feeling. And I think there are so many different parts to the book that different people will relate to, and there are lessons that they can take for their own lives and help them think differently potentially about challenges that they might be facing. So I think there's not one lesson that applies to everybody, but I think there are elements kind of throughout the story that hopefully will resonate with different people, and people will take different things away to help them in their own lives.
And I think the lessons that you have learned and are now paying it forward through your book are universal to the human experience. Not everyone's going to row. I am not signing up for that adventure, but the lessons you've learned that we can apply in our daily life is very real and applicable for all of us. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm certainly not saying that everyone should go and sign up to row an ocean, but everyone should, I think, aspire to their own version of extraordinary, whatever that looks like for each person, and not to be put off by self-limiting beliefs or perceptions of society about what we should and shouldn't be doing at whatever age we are.
Beautiful. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with our listener?
I think it's just going back to that message that we are all so much stronger and more capable than we think. And often it takes a big life event or some kind of adversity to recognize that and to test us. And what I'd love people to do is just to realize that it's there all along, and that if they can harness that, they can do amazing things.
Thank you. You said earlier in our interview that with every challenge, you came out stronger. And that's what challenges and adversity does. It makes you stronger. And so I want to encourage people to not shy away from the challenges. Don't take the easy way out. There's always an easy way out. I remember in college, I had a professor and she was being very sensitive to my situation, and she assigned a 10-page paper. And after class, she came to me and she said, Pauline, I know it takes you a lot longer and more effort to do the research, type the paper up. So if you want to make yours 5, that's okay. And the lazy human in me be like, okay, I'm getting it. I have an out. All right, what do we do? But these are the moments when our character is defined. And I knew in my heart of hearts that the moment I started compromising with life, like if I don't meet life at a certain level, when I have permission to do 5, when the requirement is 10, when the moment you start compromising with life, it will start compromising with you.
Absolutely. And I think it's also really important to almost get into the habit of making those hard decisions every day. They don't have to be big, hard decisions, but the daily little decisions, taking the hard decisions, the hard choices, because that gets you into the habit of doing it. So that when you do come across something that's much bigger, it feels more natural to go for it. You're so right. You do learn that it becomes easier and easier. And actually, the rewards you get from taking those tough decisions and not taking the path of least resistance are so much greater. When I was reflecting this week about what I've done this year, I've published a book. I'm doing my professional speaking, standing on stages in front of people. I've run the highest marathon in the world at Everest Base Camp. None of these things I could possibly have imagined doing about 3 or 4 years ago before rowing the Atlantic. But it was doing that made me really realize that I could almost do anything. And it gave me the courage and the confidence to try new things. And so that's when I think about how my life has changed as a result of saying yes to that pretty scary and daunting challenge. I would just encourage everybody to go and push themselves, challenge themselves, make themselves a bit scared and see where it takes them.
Beautiful advice. Thank you so much, Felicity. Thank you for being on the Small Victories podcast. And to you, the listener, I want to note that today's conversation reminds us that storms, whether waves, illness, loss, or self-doubt, don't define us, they refine us. You've heard how mindset, purpose, and ordinary human grit can transform the impossible into the achievable. No matter the challenge you face today, you are stronger than the storm you're in. Use your superpower, your grit, your heart, your why to push forward. Ordinary people can and do achieve extraordinary things. So go on, live victoriously. Thank you for tuning in, and until we meet again, be blessed.
Angel of light, come into me, show me what I need to see.